The transport dropped Kellan Voss at the edge of the grasslands and left him there with 3 crates of equipment, a water canteen, and the distinct feeling that he had made a terrible mistake. Avara stretched before him in every direction, gold grass rolling to the horizon, broken by stands of flat-topped trees and the pale, crumbling shapes of ruins half swallowed by earth. The air smelled of dust and warm stone. Somewhere far off, something large moved through the grass, and Kellan told himself it was the wind. He had come across 3 star systems for this. The Kellan ruins, a vanished civilization that predated recorded history on Avara, a people who had built temples aligned to constellations that no longer existed. Every academic on 4 worlds wanted access to that dig site, and Kellan had spent 2 years and most of his savings securing the one thing that mattered more than money. A guide from the clans who controlled the land. You are the outsider who wishes to walk in Zareya's shadow. Kellan turned. The voice had come from nowhere, low and amused, and by the time he located its source she was already standing 3 feet away, arms crossed, watching him with an expression that suggested she found him mildly disappointing. She was tall, taller than him by a few inches. With tawny skin dusted gold at the cheekbones, and a pair of black-tipped cheetah ears that swiveled with quick, restless precision atop her head. A long tail moved behind her, marked with the same dark spots that dappled her forearms and the sharp line of her jaw. She wore simple leathers built for speed rather than protection, and she stood with the coiled stillness of someone who had never in her life needed to hurry to prove a point. Kellan Voss, he said, sticking out a hand. She looked at the hand the way one might look at a small, harmless insect that had wandered somewhere it didn't belong. Zareya, she said. Fastest tracker of the Sundern clan. And you will slow me down. I haven't even unpacked yet. You will. She turned and started walking, and Kellan realized with a jolt that she expected him to follow, immediately, and at a pace clearly designed to test him. Humans always do. You were boots built for cities. You carry water like you don't know how to find it. You will slow me down, Kellan Voss, and I will be paid regardless, so it makes no difference to me. Kellan grabbed the nearest crate and jogged after her, already sweating in the heat. Good talk, he muttered. Really feeling the hospitality. She didn't look back, but her tail flicked once, and if he hadn't known better, he might have called it amusement. The first 2 weeks were, by Kellan's own private admission, humiliating. Zareya moved across the savanna like she had been poured from the same gold light that soaked the grass, economical, unhurried, and impossibly fast when speed was called for. Kellan, by contrast, tripped over roots. He mistimed river crossings. He set up his tent wrong the first 4 nights running, until Zareya finally sat down across the fire from him, watched him fumble with a support pole for the 5th time, and said, without any particular unkindness, "You are the strangest predator I have ever tracked. You cannot smell danger, you cannot outrun danger, and you insist on building yourself a small fragile house every night as though the ground might eat you." It's called shelter, Kellan said, giving up on the pole and letting the whole structure list sideways. Some of us didn't evolve built-in weatherproofing. Some of us, Zareya said, did. Her ears twitched with what he was beginning to recognize as her version of laughter. She rarely smiled with her mouth, but her ears betrayed her constantly, swiveling and flicking in ways she clearly didn't notice. It became a rhythm between them. He teased, she was unimpressed. She teased. He pretended to be wounded. At night, over the fire, she would ask him about the ruins he'd come to study, and he found himself explaining star charts and dead languages to a woman who listened with far more attention than he expected from someone who had called the whole endeavor, on their first night, digging up the bones of people who don't want to be found. Why do you care what they wanted? He'd asked. Because the dead cannot argue with you, Zareya had said. And I do not trust anyone who only picks fights they know they'll win. He'd laughed at that, surprised, and something in her face had shifted, not quite a smile, but close to one, like sunlight finding a crack in stone. By the 3rd week, the teasing had softened into something else. She began matching her pace to his without being asked, though she always pretended it was coincidence. He began waking early to make her the strange, oversweetened tea he'd noticed she secretly liked, though he always pretended it was simply because he was awake anyway. Neither of them named what was happening. Both of them noticed. It happened on an ordinary evening, at an ordinary fire, over an argument that had started ordinarily enough, about whether humans or cheetah kin were better suited to the savanna. "You have no claws," Zareya said, counting off his deficiencies on clawed fingers with visible relish. "No speed. No night eyes. If I released you into the grass right now with nothing but your two soft hands, you would not survive until sunrise." "I have plenty of speed," Kellan said, stung, though he was smiling. "You've just never seen me actually try. I have watched you fall down a hill, Kellan Voss. That hill was unreasonably steep." "No human," Zareya said, leaning back with the lazy confidence of someone laying a trap she didn't expect anyone to walk into, "could keep pace with me. Not for 100 strides. Not if their life depended on it." And Kellan, tired, sun-warmed, feeling closer to her than he had to almost anyone in his life, and utterly unable to resist the bait, grinned and said the words that would upend everything. "Prove it. I challenge you to a race." He meant it as nothing more than what it sounded like. A joke between friends. A dare. The silence that answered him was not a joke. Zareya went very still. Her ears, which had been flicking with lazy good humor a moment before, pinned flat against her skull. Around the fire, 3 other members of her clan, who Kellan had assumed were simply half listening to the conversation the way people do, had gone rigid, staring at him with an intensity he didn't understand. "Say that again," Zareya said quietly. "I challenge you to a race?" Kellan repeated, uncertain now, feeling the ground shift beneath a conversation he thought he understood. One of the elders near the fire rose without a word and walked swiftly into the dark toward the clan's central camp. "Zareya," Kellan said. "What did I just do?" Zareya was looking at him with an expression he had never seen on her face before, something caught between fury and wonder, guarded and unguarded all at once. "Among my people," she said slowly, "a formal race is not sport, Kellan Voss. It has not been sport for 1,000 years. When one issues the challenge, they declare before their whole clan that they believe the other worthy of becoming their partner for life. And when the challenge is accepted," she stopped, and her tail lashed once, sharply, against the dirt, "it means the other is willing to consider the bond." Kellan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "You have just proposed marriage to me," Zareya said, in front of witnesses, "in the oldest way my people know." Word moved through the Sundern camp faster than Kellan could process what was happening. By the time he found his footing enough to speak again, half the clan had gathered at a respectful distance, watching the two of them with the particular hush of people witnessing something they'd been quietly hoping for. "I didn't mean," Kellan started. "I know," Zareya said. Her voice had gone strange, careful, stripped of its usual teasing edge. "I know you did not mean it as we mean it." "Then you can just decline, right? Say I'm an outsider who didn't understand the custom, and we go back to camp and pretend this never." "Is that what you want?" Zareya asked, and there was something underneath the question that made Kellan's chest tighten. Not challenge. Not pride. Something closer to fear, carefully hidden. He thought about the last 5 weeks. The tea she pretended not to like. The pace she pretended not to slow. The nights by the fire when she'd asked him questions about Earth with a hunger that had nothing to do with academic curiosity and everything to do with wanting to know him. He thought about how, somewhere in the last month, this savanna that had terrified him on arrival had become the place he most wanted to be. Not because of the ruins, not because of the research, but because of the woman standing in front of him now with her ears pinned flat, bracing for him to take the easy way out. "No," he said. "That's not what I want." Zareya's ears came up, slowly, cautiously, like something that had learned the hard way not to hope too quickly. "Then you understand," she said, "that I have not yet answered." She turned, and for one terrible second Kellan thought she was walking away from him for good. Instead she walked to the center of the gathered clan, drew herself up to her full height, and spoke in a voice that carried across the whole camp. Kellan Voss of Earth has challenged me before witnesses, she declared. I, Zareya of the Sundern clan, accept. The camp erupted, not in scandal, as Kellan had half feared, but in noise that was unmistakably celebration. Someone began beating a drum. An elder was already calling out logistics. The race begins at sunrise, the course must be marked, the trials must be prepared, as though a machine long dormant had simply been waiting for this exact moment to roar back to life. Zareya walked back to Kellan through the chaos, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked almost shy. You should know, she said, that I do not do this lightly. And that the race will not be easy on you. I didn't think it would be, Kellan said. Good. A flicker of her old grin returned. Because I intend to leave you eating my dust, husband-to-be. That night, an elder named Old Morel, small, silver-furred, missing half an ear to some ancient injury, sat Kellan down by a private fire and explained what he had unknowingly begun. You think this is a test of speed, she said. It is not. It has never been. Speed is easy to test and easy to fake. What our ancestors wanted to know before they bound two lives together was harder to measure. So they built a race that could not be won by legs alone. Then what wins it? Courage. Judgment. Loyalty. Endurance. And the thing hardest of all to fake under pressure, whether you would set aside your own victory to protect the person beside you. Morel's dark eyes fixed on him, unreadable. The course crosses grassland, ruins, ravines, and the territories of the great grass lions, who do not care for the old customs and will not spare you out of respect for tradition. Many things can go wrong on that course, Kellan Voss. That is rather the point. And if I fail? Then you fail, Morel said simply. And Zareya will have learned something true about you before it was too late to matter. That is a kindness, whatever it costs you tonight. Kellan sat with that for a long moment, staring into the fire. Then he asked the question that had been sitting under his ribs since the moment Zareya said husband-to-be. Does she want this? Really? Or does the ritual leave her any room to refuse honestly? Something in Morel's ancient face softened, just slightly. She accepted before the whole clan, boy. We do not force acceptance. If she had wished to refuse, she needed only to say so, and no one would have thought less of her. She studied him. You asked the right question, at least. That is a good sign, for whatever my old opinion is worth. Kellan did not sleep. He lay in his tent turning over every fear he had. That he would embarrass himself, that he would embarrass her, that some ancient trial designed by a lost civilization would find him fundamentally lacking in whatever quality made a person worth loving. When the sky outside began to lighten from black to bruised purple, he gave up on rest entirely and walked out to find Zareya already waiting at the starting line, silhouetted against the coming dawn. Couldn't sleep either? He asked. I have raced 100 times, she said. I have never been nervous before a race. Her ears flicked sideways, the tell he'd learned to read as discomfort. I do not enjoy the feeling. For what it's worth, Kellan said, you don't look nervous. You look like you're about to leave me in the dust, exactly as promised. That got the ghost of a real smile out of her. That part, at least, is not in question. The whole clan had gathered along the starting line by the time the sun broke the horizon, painting the grassland gold-orange and throwing long shadows from the ruined stones scattered across the plain. Rashan stood near the front of the crowd, a broad-shouldered warrior with dark rosettes and a permanently unimpressed expression, arms crossed, watching Kellan with open skepticism. Kellan had heard the name in passing over the past weeks. Zareya's former intended, a match the clan elders had once favored before Zareya herself had quietly, persistently declined it, year after year, without ever fully explaining why. Old Morel raised a carved wooden staff above her head. The course is old, she called out, her voice carrying clean across the grass. The course is honest. It will ask both of you what you are made of. Run it with open eyes. she brought the staff down. Run. And Zareya was gone. A golden blur across the grass, already 50 strides out before Kellan's second footfall landed. He laughed, breathless, and ran after her into the dawn. The grassland trial was, by any measure, a disaster for Kellan. Zareya vanished ahead of him within the first minute, and he spent the next hour navigating by the trampled grass of her passage, stumbling over hidden burrows, misjudging the height of the seed-heavy grass that hid uneven ground beneath it. He fell twice. He lost his water canteen crossing a shallow creek and had to backtrack, cursing, to fish it out of the mud. By the time he reached the first checkpoint, a lone standing stone marking the boundary between grassland and the ruined outer wall of the old city, Zareya was already there, sitting cross-legged on the stone's base, looking entirely unbothered. "You are slow," she observed, "even for a human." "Yes, thank you, I'm aware," Kellan wheezed, bracing his hands on his knees. "But you did not stop," Zareya said, and something in her voice made him look up. She wasn't teasing now. She was watching him with real attention. Many would have. "The trial does not require speed, Kellan Voss. It requires that you keep moving forward even when the ground refuses to help you." "Good thing I'm stubborn, then." "That," Zareya said, standing and offering him a hand up, "is the first true thing the course has learned about you." The ruins trial tested judgment, and here Kellan, soft-handed, city-raised, utterly without claws or night vision, found something he hadn't expected, an advantage. Years of fieldwork had taught him to read collapsed architecture, to recognize which stones would bear weight and which would crumble, to spot the ghost lines of old doorways buried under centuries of dust. Where Zareya moved by instinct and speed, Kellan moved by careful calculation, and for the first time in the race, he found himself only a few dozen strides behind her rather than hopelessly outmatched. "You know this place," Zareya said, surprised, when he caught up to her at a collapsed archway she'd been circling, unable to find a safe way through. "Not this place specifically," Kellan said, studying the stonework. "But places like it. Give me a second." He traced the mortar lines with his eyes, found the load-bearing point, and gestured to a narrow gap along the wall's northern edge. "There. That section's newer, a later repair, probably centuries after the original build. It won't hold as much weight, which means it was built to flex rather than bear load. Should be stable enough to pass through if we're careful." Zareya looked at him for a long moment, not at the archway, at him, with an expression he couldn't quite name. "What?" he asked. "Nothing," she said, and there was something almost soft in her voice now. "I simply did not expect the slow human to teach the fast cheetah something about her own ancestor's city." They went through together. The ravine trial, immediately after, tested nerve. A narrow stone bridge, ancient and crumbling, spanned a drop deep enough that Kellan couldn't see the bottom through the morning mist rising off it. Zareya crossed first, light-footed and sure, and turned to watch him with poorly hidden concern as he inched across, white-knuckled, refusing to look down. "You are afraid," she said when he reached the other side, his hands shaking. "Terrified," Kellan admitted. "Didn't stop, though." "No," Zareya agreed, and there was real warmth in her voice now, unguarded in a way he hadn't heard from her before. "You did not. The territory of the great grass lions was where everything went wrong." Kellan smelled them before he saw them, a heavy, musky scent riding the wind, and Zareya's ears snapped up and forward, every trace of playfulness gone in an instant. "Stay low," she breathed. "Stay quiet. This is not a checkpoint we can outrun, Kellan Voss. We must be invisible." They moved together through the tall grass, Kellan following Zareya's lead with a discipline he hadn't known he possessed, mimicking her low crouch, matching his breathing to hers. Twice, a low rumbling growl rolled out from somewhere in the grass ahead, and twice they froze completely, Zareya's hand closing hard around Kellan's wrist, until the danger passed. They nearly made it through clean. It was Kellan who slipped, a loose stone under his boot, a stumble, a muffled curse, and the grass exploded 20 feet away as a great grass lion, easily 3 times his body weight, surged up from where it had been resting, hidden, in the shade of a broken pillar. Run! Zareya shouted, and for one instant, instinct nearly took Kellan's legs out from under him in the wrong direction, nearly sent him bolting alone, the way every survival reflex in his body screamed at him too. But he saw Zareya plant herself between him and the lion instead of fleeing, saw her drop into a fighting stance with nothing but a hunting knife against a predator that could kill her in one strike, and something in him refused to let that be the last thing he did in this race. With me! He shouted back, grabbing a fallen branch from the ruins, and instead of running, he moved to stand at her shoulder. The lion charged. What happened next was chaos, a blur of motion, Zareya's speed the only thing that kept either of them alive as she darted and struck and drew the beast's attention while Kellan, shouting and swinging the branch, made himself as large and threatening as he could manage. It was Zareya's knife, finally, that opened a shallow but painful gash along the lion's flank, sending it roaring back into the grass rather than pressing the attack, but not before one great sweeping paw caught Zareya across the ribs and sent her sprawling hard into the base of a collapsed temple wall. She didn't get up. Everything else stopped mattering. The race, the finish line, the trial, Rashawn's smug certainty that Kellan would fail, none of it existed anymore. Kellan dropped the branch and ran to Zareya's side, heart in his throat, and found her conscious but gasping, one hand pressed to her ribs, blood welling dark between her fingers. "I'm fine," she managed. "Go. Finish the course. You are close to." "Stop it," Kellan said, already tearing a strip from his shirt to press against the wound. "I'm not finishing anything without you." "Kellan." Her voice was tight with pain, but her eyes were fierce, almost angry. "This is your chance. The course does not wait for injuries. If you carry me, you will lose." "I don't care. You don't understand what you're—" "I understand perfectly," Kellan said, and something in his voice made her stop arguing. "I came here to survey ruins. I didn't come here to win a race. If finishing first means leaving you bleeding in the grass, then I don't want to finish first. I never did. I just want you to be all right." For a long moment, Zareya simply looked at him. Really looked, the way she had at the archway, except deeper now, like she was seeing something she hadn't let herself believe was real until this exact moment. "Then help me up," she said finally, quietly. "Because I would very much like to see how you intend to carry me across a ravine bridge, human." Kellan laughed, half relieved, half terrified, and got his arms under her. "Watch me." It was, without question, the hardest thing Kellan had ever done. He carried Zareya out of the lion's territory first, moving as fast as his exhausted legs allowed while she directed him around threats her nose could smell that his human senses couldn't detect. Across the ravine bridge, he went one careful step at a time, sweat running into his eyes, Zareya's weight and her murmured steady, steady, you have it the only things keeping his nerve intact over the drop. Through the ruins a second time, he retraced their earlier path from memory, choosing the same stable stones, refusing to risk a shortcut that might collapse under the added weight. By the time the grassland opened up ahead of them, the finish line visible now as a cluster of standing stones on the horizon, the whole clan gathered and watching, Kellan's arms were shaking, his legs barely holding him upright, his shirt soaked through with sweat and Zareya's blood. "Put me down," Zareya said softly, somewhere in that last stretch. "You have proven what needed proving. Let me walk the rest." "Absolutely not," Kellan said, jaw tight with effort. "We started this together. We're finishing it together. Even if it's last." "Especially if it's last," he didn't say, but she seemed to hear it anyway. He did not run across that finish line. He walked, slow, exhausted, half collapsing under Zareya's weight. Long after every other measure of the race had been decided, long after speed had stopped mattering to anyone watching. And when he finally crossed the marked stones and sank to his knees, gently setting Zareya down against the nearest one, the entire clan was silent. Then old Morel began, very quietly, to clap. "You misunderstand," Zareya said later, once the clan's healer had bound her ribs and pressed strong-smelling medicine into the wound, once she'd insisted, over Kellan's protests. on sitting upright to speak with him properly. You believe you failed the race because you did not finish first. I did finish last, Kellan pointed out. By a significant margin. The strongest partners, Zareya said, are not the ones who cross the line first, Kellan Voss. They are the ones who refuse to cross it alone. She reached out, wincing slightly at the movement, and closed her hand over his. You could have finished that race in half the time if you had left me in the grass. No one would have blamed you. It would have been the sensible choice, by every measure our ancestors could have tested for. Instead, you carried me across a ravine on legs that were already failing, because leaving was never something you were willing to consider. I wasn't thinking about the race, Kellan admitted quietly. I was thinking about you. I know, Zareya said, and her voice cracked slightly on the words. That is exactly why you did not fail. The peace of that moment lasted exactly until Rashawn pushed through the gathered clan, expression like a gathering storm. This is absurd, he said, loud enough to carry. An outsider, soft-handed, slow-footed, ignorant of everything our people hold sacred, stumbles through the oldest ritual we possess, and you would call it a triumph? He did not win. He did not even finish with honor. He finished carrying you, half dead on his feet, having lost nearly every trial along the way. He finished, old Morel said mildly, having passed the only trial that has ever mattered. The trial is not complete, Rashawn snapped, and you know it, Elder. The forgotten final rite still stands, the temple trial, unclaimed by any pair in 3 generations because the depths beneath the ruins collapsed and were sealed. If this outsider truly means to claim Zareya, let him prove it there, in the one place tradition cannot be bent by sentiment. Let him enter the buried temple and recover the ceremonial sunstone, as the old law demands of any challenger whose worthiness is questioned. A murmur ran through the gathered clan. Kellan looked to Zareya, still bandaged, still pale from blood loss, and saw something tighten in her jaw. He is injured, Zareya said. I am injured. This is not fair challenge, Rashawn, and you know it. Fair or not, Rashawn said, it is law. Unless he wishes to withdraw his claim entirely. Every eye in the clan turned to Kellan. He thought about walking away. It would have been easy, Zareya herself had offered him the chance, back on that first terrible night. No one would think less of him for declining a trial that ancient law itself considered forgotten, dangerous, and unfair. He could survey his ruins, finish his research, and leave Avara with his life intact and uncomplicated. He thought about the way Zareya had looked at him crossing that finish line. About the tea she pretended not to like. About the woman who had put herself between him and a lion without a second's hesitation. I'll do it, Kellan said. Show me the temple. The entrance to the forgotten temple lay beneath a collapsed section of the ruins Kellan had studied a dozen times without ever suspecting what lay underneath. A stone slab disguised as ordinary rubble, which took 4 clan members and considerable effort to shift aside, revealing a dark stairwell descending into the earth. I'm coming with you, Zareya said, already moving toward the entrance despite her bound ribs, before Kellan could even open his mouth to argue. You're hurt. You are exhausted and unfamiliar with the language carved on these walls, Zareya shot back. We are, apparently, both a poor choice for this trial individually. Together, we might manage. Kellan looked at her, stubborn, injured, utterly unwilling to be left behind, and felt something in his chest ache with a fondness so sharp it was almost painful. Together, then, he agreed, and they descended into the dark side by side. The temple beneath the ruins was unlike anything Kellan had excavated in 2 years of fieldwork. Walls covered floor to ceiling in carvings that combined the angular script of Zareya's ancestors with a second language Kellan recognized with a jolt of professional astonishment as belonging to an entirely different, entirely human-adjacent culture, one he'd only ever seen fragments of in academic papers about pre-contact settlements. This isn't just a Cheetah clan temple, he breathed, running his fingers over a carved panel depicting 2 figures. One clearly an ancestor of Zareya's people, one strikingly, unmistakably human in shape, standing together beneath a rising sun. Zareya, look at this. Your ancestors and mine, they knew each other. They worked together. Zareya stared at the panel for a long moment, ears low with something like reverence. The old stories say the race was created to preserve bloodlines, she murmured. To keep our people separate from outsiders, strong and unmixed. Her hand rose to trace the two carved figures, standing shoulder to shoulder. This says otherwise. They pressed deeper into the temple, translating what they could between them, his knowledge of ancient scripts, her fluency in the old-spoken dialects, piecing together a story neither civilization had remembered accurately for 1,000 years. The race, they learned, had never been designed as a gatekeeping ritual to keep outsiders away. It had been designed by two peoples working together, in a time when human and cheetah-kin ancestors had shared this land as allies, as a way of testing whether two individuals, regardless of where they came from, were suited to a lifetime bound together. Somewhere across the centuries, after whatever alliance had once existed here crumbled and was forgotten, the meaning had calcified into something narrower and more suspicious than it was ever meant to be. It was never about keeping people apart, Kellan said quietly, staring at the carved sunrise. It was about finding the people worth choosing, no matter where they started from. They found the ceremonial sunstone in the temple's final chamber, a fist-sized crystal, warm to the touch, catching what little light reached it and scattering it across the walls in fractured gold. But the moment Kellan lifted it from its ancient resting place, the chamber shuddered, dust sifting down from the ceiling in a warning neither of them needed explained. Move, Zareya said, and they ran. The temple came down behind them as they broke into daylight, coughing dust, the sunstone clutched tight in Kellan's hand and Zareya's arm looped through his for balance on her still injured side. The gathered clan surged forward with relief and astonishment in equal measure as the two of them emerged, filthy and exhausted and very much alive. Rashawn's face, Kellan noted with some private satisfaction, had gone through several complicated expressions before settling on something like grudging respect. Old Morel took the sunstone from Kellan's hands with something close to reverence, turning it slowly in the light. It has been 3 generations since anyone claimed this, she said. 3 generations since anyone was brave enough, or foolish enough, to try. Her sharp old eyes moved between Kellan and Zareya. Tell us what you found down there. So they told the gathered clan everything, the carvings, the shared language, the true origin of the ritual their ancestors had slowly, quietly forgotten. Kellan watched understanding ripple through the crowd, watched centuries of assumption crack open in real time, watched Rashawn's certainty falter and finally, visibly, break. I was wrong, Rashawn said at last, low but audible in the stunned quiet. He looked at Kellan, not with warmth, exactly, but with something honest. I thought I was protecting something old and sacred. I did not know I was protecting a mistake. He inclined his head, a small, formal gesture. The trial is complete. The claim stands, if the claim is still wished. Every eye turned again to Kellan. You could still walk away, Zareya said quietly, once the clan had given them a measure of space, once the dust of the day had begun to settle into something like calm. You know the truth of it now. This was never meant to bind you to something you stumbled into by accident. You could withdraw the claim with honor, and no one, least of all me, would think less of you for it. Is that what you want? Kellan asked, echoing her own words back to her from that first impossible night. Zareya's ears went very still. You know it is not. Good, Kellan said. Because I don't want to withdraw anything. He took a breath, steadying himself, and reached for the words he'd been quietly practicing in his head since somewhere in that collapsing temple, words in her language, clumsy on his tongue but sincere in every syllable. Zareya of the Sundern clan. I challenge you to a race. He said it properly this time, not as a careless dare between friends, but as the deliberate, weighted thing it had always secretly meant, spoken now with full understanding of every word. The clan around them went hushed in an entirely different way than before, not shock this time, but something closer to held breath. Zareya stared at him, and for one long, suspended moment, Kellan couldn't read her expression at all. Then her ears came up. Her tail flicked, once, sharp and bright with something unmistakably like joy. "I accept," she said. "But you should know, Kellan Voss, our first race, you won through stubbornness and a great deal of luck. Our second race will be real. I do not intend to make this easy on you." "I wouldn't want it easy," Kellan said, grinning despite the ache in every muscle he owned. "I'd just like a moment to catch my breath first." "No," Zareya said, already backing away toward the open grassland, eyes bright, injury apparently forgotten in the sheer delight of the moment. "I don't think you will." She was gone before he'd fully registered the challenge, a golden blur across the sunset-lit grass, laughing, faster than he had ever seen her move, faster than she'd ever needed to be with him limping along at her side. The whole clan erupted into cheering and laughter behind him, and Kellan, exhausted, bruised, filthy, deliriously happy, took off running after her into the gold light of the falling sun, knowing with absolute certainty that he would never, not in 100 races, catch her. And knowing, just as certainly, from the way she glanced back over her shoulder with her ears bright and her stride slowing just slightly, again and again, at every rise and hollow in the grass, that she had no intention of ever really leaving him behind. She would always run faster. She would always wait. And somewhere out there on the golden savanna, with the ruins of 2 forgotten civilizations behind them and an entire unclaimed future stretched out ahead, that was, Kellan thought, laughing as he ran, exactly enough. Years later, the archaeological survey Kellan had originally come to Avara to complete would note, almost as an afterthought in its final published paper, an unusual detail uncovered in the temple beneath the Sundern ruins. 2 sets of footprints, one human, one cheetah kin, preserved in ash near the temple's collapsed entrance, walking not apart but side by side. The paper would not speculate on their origin. It didn't need to. Anyone from the Sundern clan could have told them exactly whose footprints they were, the fastest tracker in a generation, and the slow, stubborn human who had never once let her finish a race alone.